Draco Malfoy and the Horror of the Heir. Written by LittleBeans19. Read for you by Gemini Wishes. Chapter 2. Mayhem on the Hogwarts Express. The Hogwarts Express. Tuesday, the 1st of September, 1992. Draco watched out the window as London became a grayish blob in the distance. He let out a deep sigh as the Hogwarts Express picked up speed, chugging along the green hills and fields of the English countryside. Once again, he was off to Hogwarts. No longer would he be able to spend his days lounging around doing nothing. Goodbye skies of blue and beautiful mansion house. Hello clouds of grey, miserable Scottish countryside, and bleak, cold castle. Goodbye endless supply of delicate French pastries and ice cream sundaes. Hello stodgy pies and lumpy mashed potatoes. Goodbye sleeping till gone 10 o'clock. Hello. Draco let out a yelp, his inner monologue rudely being interrupted as he was thrown forward by a heavy weight dropping onto his shoulders. He scowled as he saw a blur of black and orange in the corner of his eye. "Vincent! She's doing it again!" Vincent looked up from his and Gregory's game of cards.
"Tortoise doesn't mean any harm, Draco," he said. "She's just taken a liking to you."
"Ugh," said Draco in response, tucking his nose into Wandering with Werewolves as Vincent's fat cat purred in his ear. "Go fish," announced Vincent proudly, slamming his cards down on the makeshift table they'd made using their trunks.
"Oh,"
said Gregory, his brow furrowed.
"I thought we were playing Snap?"
Draco rolled his eyes. It was just his luck to get lumped with these two bumbling fools yet again. He was finally settling into his book, eagerly turning the page as Lockhart tamed the Hound of Hungary by using his wand for a game of fetch with it, when their compartment door rattled open without warning, causing Tortoise to startle and jump down from Draco's shoulders into Vincent's lap. Honestly, this was starting to get ridiculous. It hadn't even been 15 minutes since leaving King's Cross Station. "Oh, hello, Draco." It was Granger, along with that Weasley girl from Flourish and Blots. "Do you mind if we join you? It's jam-packed out there." Without waiting for an answer, Granger began pushing inside. "Hello, Crab. Hello, Goyle. Did you have a nice—" "Who is this?" she gasped in delight as she noticed Tortoise. Draco frowned at Girl Weasley, who closed the door and took a seat as close to it as possible, looking at Vincent and Gregory warily. He turned to Granger. "Where's Potter and the other one?" "You mean Ron?" Girl Weasley said, eyebrows furrowed. Draco shrugged carelessly.
"Do I?"
Granger paused in her fawning over Vincent's cat. "I'm not sure, actually," she frowned. "Ginny, did you see them?" No, I last saw them at the train station," said Girl Weasley. "Oh, shall we look for them then? We did all promise we'd sit together back in August." Did they now? Draco hadn't been aware of that little pact. Then again, his father had been attacked by Arthur Weasley and they'd made quite a scene, his father having to hurry them home with his tail between his legs, embarrassingly enough. Not wanting to bring that up, Draco cleared his throat. "Are we going to have to search the whole train? Believe me, it is not as easy as it sounds." "I know. I spent the whole of my first ride to Hogwarts looking for Neville's toad," Granger sighed wearily.
"And I for Harry."
Oh, Merlin's rusty shoe buckle. He hadn't meant to say that aloud. He looked up to find Granger giving him an amused, calculating look, and the Girl Weasley squinting at him with visible confusion and something else. Thankfully, Vincent and Gregory were minding their own business. What are you looking at me like that for?" he snapped at the girls, feeling his face become hot. "No reason," Granger said slowly. "Anyway, shall we go make sure they haven't missed the train or anything?" she giggled, before her face fell and she sat bolt upright. "Oh my God, what if they have missed the train?" "I don't see how they could have," Girl Weasley said. "We were late, but we weren't that late." "Vincent? Gregory?" Draco asked, standing up.
"We're good, thanks," grunted Gregory,
immersed in his and Vincent's card game.
"Enjoy your search," Vincent chirped.
"Right. Shall we split up?" Draco asked hopefully as they exited the compartment. "Cover more ground?" "No thanks," said Girl Weasley firmly, hooking her arm through Granger's. "I'd rather not get lost." "And I was so looking forward to spend the trip reading," lamented Granger, clutching Voyages with Vampires close to her chest. The first compartment they tried seemed to be packed full of the whole Gryffindor Quidditch team, along with Lee Jordan, but no Harry.
"If you do see Potter, tell him we need to talk strategy," said Oliver Wood, while the twin Weasleys made pained, choking gestures behind his back, coaxing a giggle from Girl Weasley. Draco, on the other hand, was trying very hard not to stare at Wood's exposed arms, as they had gotten, broader over the past summer holidays, which was, for some reason, affecting Draco's vision, as his eyes kept darting back to them. Perhaps Wood had cast some sort of spell on them. He heaved a sigh of relief as they finally left the compartment, darting down the corridor with Granger and Girl Weasley in tow. Had it gotten warmer on the train? Draco certainly felt a little flushed. It was probably all the running around. "In all seriousness, though," one of the twin Weasleys called after them. "If they have missed the train," said the other, "we'll be sure to send them a postcard from Hogsmeade," they finished simultaneously, cackling.
"You two are the worst," Girl Weasley yelled back, poking her tongue out at them.
"We know."
Draco rolled his eyes. Weasleys. The results were similar for the next several compartments, filled to the brim with various Slytherins, Gryffindors, Hufflepuffs, and Ravenclaws, but no Harry Potter. Or Ron Weasley, but honestly, who cared about that? Only one compartment they stumbled into held one passenger, a young girl in first-year robes, her tawny blonde hair twisted upwards into very peculiar looping braids, humming as she gazed out of the window with a vacant expression. "Well, looks like they aren't here," Draco hissed, grabbing Granger's elbow and making to shut the compartment door, but he wasn't quick enough, as the girl stopped humming and turned to look at them. "Why, hello there, Cousin Draco," she greeted, smiling gently. Draco sighed, his shoulders drooping. "Hello, Luna," he replied through gritted teeth. "Oh, you two are cousins?" Granger said, sending a half-questioning glance at Draco. "That's nice." "Well, actually, Granger, most purebloods are related," Draco sniffed. "Loony here just happens to be closer than most." Granger scrunched her face into an expression Draco had come to realize was the face she made when she received new information from anyone besides a teacher or a book. "You wouldn't have happened to have seen two second-year boys, would you?" asked Girl Weasley. "One clearly a Weasley, the other Harry Potter," Draco added, ignoring the glare Girl Weasley gave him. Luna only tilted her head, her pale eyes suddenly clearer as she looked at Draco. "You know, you really ought to be more careful with imaginary friends." Draco stared at her, a shiver trickling down his spine. "Right," Granger piped up when the silence had gone on for a bit too long, her eyebrows reaching her hairline. "Well, anyway, we'd best get back to searching. Nice to meet you." "Oh, have you lost something?" Luna asked politely. "We did just say," Granger began. "Come on, it's not worth it," Draco said, hurrying them out. As they shut the door, Draco twirled his finger near his temple. Granger chuckled nervously while Girl Weasley just kept on scowling at him. "Draco, what you said back there about purebloods," Granger said after a moment. "Well, what's all that about?" "What's a pureblood about?" Draco asked. "Granger, do you not know something for once?" Granger let out a loud harumph. "Well, I know that I'm a Muggle-born witch because I come from Muggle parents, and I know that there's a group called the Sacred 28 Families, but I haven't realized there were more differences, really. Of course, I've heard of the term pure-blooded before. I do pay attention in history of magic, but I just realized I don't actually know that much about all of it. I just sort of assumed it didn't matter, and if you had magic, then you had magic." "Didn't matter?" Draco yelped, startled. "You assumed it didn't matter?" He began to laugh so much that he had to support himself by placing his hands on his knees. "Granger, of course it matters," he managed through his dying chortles. "Blood is the very thing that defines Wixen nature. My father says it's the most important thing, keeping pure Wixen blood alive." "So if my blood isn't pure, what is it?" Granger asked waspishly. "Impure? That sounds terribly wrong. Maybe it matters to your father, Draco, but perhaps it shouldn't matter to you, because it certainly doesn't matter to me." Draco blinked, suddenly feeling quite wrong-footed. He wasn't sure what he'd found so funny anymore. Don't be rude or disrespectful to Muggleborns in any way. That was something written on the very first page of the journal. Another warning future Draco wanted him to heed. Don't follow Father's footsteps.
Sometimes it was hard when the only thing Draco had ever known was just that.
I'm sorry, but I just can't keep quiet anymore, Girl Weasley piped up, sounding just as irritated as Granger. Hermione, are you, Ron, and Harry seriously friends with him?
Draco sniffed, finding himself too preoccupied to get offended for once.
It's a long story, Ginny,
said Granger, as they carried on down the train corridor in thoughtful silence. The next compartment they knocked on was slightly more full than the last. Pansy Parkinson opened the door to them, an enthusiastic smile lighting up her face when she laid eyes on Draco.
Draco, there you are, she exclaimed,
her face falling when she saw who was behind him.
What are you up to with them?
We were just looking for something, Draco finished lamely. What's all this?
Since we're all 12 now, we are having a proper high tea, Daphne Greengrass explained primly. Mother gifted me an enchanted tea set for my birthday.
Draco stared at the floating shiny silver teapot and the cakes, biscuits, and sandwiches laid out on a similarly floating 3-tier stand. Draco watched as the teapot drifted down and magically tipped on its own, pouring steaming brown liquid into Vincent's teacup. He then did a double-take, because yes, there Vincent and Gregory were, sipping from teacups with their pinkies pointed out.
How did you two get in here? He asked, bewildered.
You didn't pass us. He turned to Granger. Did they? Without waiting for an answer, he swiveled back to Gregory and Vincent. Did you? They have cake, said Gregory, as if that was a reasonable explanation, stuffing a petit four in his gob. So does the trolley, Girl Weasley muttered under her breath, blowing a strand of hair out of her face.
Oh, yes, said Pansy, looking at Daphne. The trolley.
The two witches giggled into their teacups.
What's wrong with the trolley?
Granger piped up, folding her arms.
Well, I wouldn't expect you to understand,
Pansy scoffed. Daphne giggled once more.
And what's that supposed to mean?
Granger snapped.
Nothing. Don't get your wand in a knot.
Pansy managed through her giggles, mirth dancing in her eyes. In the next moment, she had diverted her attention to Draco, smiling sweetly.
Draco, would you like to join us?
I was hoping you'd ask, Draco sighed, taking a seat opposite her. They hadn't stopped for lunch in their hunt for Harry and Weasley, and it was surely long past lunchtime. Draco's stomach had been rumbling for the past hour, and the trolley seemed to have vanished from existence, old lady pushing it and all. Granger and Girl Weasley hesitated, exchanging a quick look before awkwardly taking seats too. Draco paid them no mind, accepting the teacup that had floated over to him and letting the enchanted teapot pour delicious-smelling hot tea in it. A few moments passed in silence, the only sounds being the chugging of the train, the murmur of distant voices, the clinking of teaspoons against silver, and the chomp of Vincent enjoying a biscuit. Pansy cleared her throat. Draco snatched the sugar bowl out of the air as it bobbed in his direction, happily stirring until he sensed the niggling feeling of eyes on him. He looked up to find Granger watching him with a look halfway between concerned and disgusted. "What?" he asked her, raising a brow as he dropped in his 5th sugar cube.
My parents say that too much sugar is bad for your teeth,
Granger said, fidgeting with the empty teacup in her hands.
What, are your parents teeth experts or something?
Pansy asked, snorting.
Yes, actually, they are. They're dentists,
Granger replied, glaring at her shrewdly. Dent what? Gregory asked. For once, Draco was just as clueless as him. Granger looked at Gregory, then at the rest of the Slytherins, then eventually at Girl Weasley, her face growing more surprised by the minute.
Does the Wixenworld really not have dentists? She finally asked. How do you all take care of your teeth? Oh, so it is a muggle thing then,
Pansy said, voice dripping with disdain as she examined her dark pink nails. Granger angrily slammed her teacup down on the makeshift trunk table.
What is so wrong with being a muggle?
Draco awkwardly raised his teacup to his lips, intending to take a sip to avoid the confrontation and the déjà vu, when the cup began rattling ominously in his hands. What in Merlin's? He began, only to gasp in surprise as the teacup floated into the air, along with everyone else's. In the next moment, the teacups had upturned themselves, dumping not quite piping hot tea into the laps of everyone in the compartment. Everyone began shouting as their teacups began darting about like birds, swooping down and trying to hit them on the head.
What's gotten into your tea set?
Draco exclaimed, batting away his teacup.
It's turned evil,
Daphne wailed, sinking down behind the trunk table. Draco looked around as Pansy let out a high-pitched scream. A stream of steaming hot tea was shooting in her direction, and she ducked in the nick of time as it splashed against the window. The enchanted teapot had then turned in the air and fired another stream of scalding brown liquid in the other direction, Vincent having to jump up on the seats to avoid getting burnt. The three-tier stand then began spinning where it floated at a frightening speed, bits of bread, cucumber, scones, cake, and biscuits flying in all directions, splattering against the windows and smacking into the wicks in a shower of high tea nibblies. "I'm gonna be killed by the thing I love the most," Gregory yelped, raising his arms as a shield against the cakes pelting down on him. "Daphne, where on earth did your mother get this tea set?" Draco cried, grabbing a passing tray in an attempt to use it as a shield, only for it to struggle in his grip, actually lifting him off the floor. He let go immediately, the tray zipping up and zooming around the compartment like an out-of-control broomstick. "How should I know?" Daphne's voice shouted back at him from behind the trunk table. "It was a birthday present!" "Oh, for goodness sake!" Granger shouted, pointing her wand in the air. "Immobilis!" Just like that, everything froze. The teacups stopped attacking them. Teapots stopped spraying hot tea. The tray stopped whizzing around, and the tiered stand stopped spinning, sandwiches and cakes suspended in midair. The silence stretched on for a long moment. Vincent plucked a ladyfinger from directly above him, biting into it and effectively breaking the tension. "Would you just look at my robes? They're completely ruined! I can't walk into the castle like this!" Pansy shrieked, gesturing down at her school robes, now covered in smears of icing, jam, buttered bread, the odd blob of egg and cress, and globs of cream. Draco could hardly find it in him to laugh. They were all in a similar state. He looked down at himself, a slice of cucumber falling from his hair and landing on the floor with a splat. "Everything was going just splendidly until she got here," Daphne whined, wiping in vain at a splooge of mustard on her sleeve while glaring at Granger. "I think you angered them with your bad manners." "Hey, you'd still be getting attacked by your teapot if it hadn't been for her," Girl Weasley exclaimed, half of a cream-covered scone falling off her shoulder. "Oh, what would you know?" Pansy huffed, throwing her jam-coated handkerchief at the floor. "Apparently a lot more than you, shallow lot," Girl Weasley snapped back. "Did you just call me shallow?" Pansy gasped. "Ginny, let's not," Granger said tersely. "Come on, we haven't searched the whole train yet." Draco grabbed a floating jam tart before hurrying after them. After all, if Harry was lurking somewhere on the train, he wanted to be there when they found him. "Draco!" he heard Pansy shriek after him. Not wanting any more confrontation, Draco picked up his pace a little bit. Before they reached the end of the carriage, they heard a distant exclamation. "What about my tea set?" "I can't believe they missed the train," Granger said, chewing fiercely at a fingernail. Draco managed not to sneer at her disgusting habit. They'd gotten off the Hogwarts Express a long time ago, having searched the entire vehicle top to bottom. A prefect had been kind enough to cast a Scourgify on them, removing almost all evidence of what Draco had chosen to call the Tea Party of Terror. It had left Draco's robe stiff and his skin slightly itchy, but at least he didn't look like a high tea had thrown up on him anymore. They were currently riding a horseless carriage up to the castle above, towering over them and silhouetted by the starry night sky. Girl Weasley had left with the rest of the first years for their boat journey, thankfully, but Draco was unfortunately then stuck with a very foul-tempered Granger, and a snoozing Gregory and Vincent, but that was a given. They were always there behind him, somewhere. Draco turned his attention back to Granger. "If they have, it's not a worry. The Ministry of Magic will be able to sort out some way of getting here." "Oh, I hope they haven't done anything stupid," Granger whined, pulling her pointed hat down over her eyes. "Why would they?" Draco began, only to stop himself as he thought about what he was saying. Actually, never mind. His remark did not help Granger, who only looked sourer and sourer as their carriage trundled on toward the castle. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, 1st of September, 1992. Draco heaved a sigh of relief as he finally escaped a by-now thunderous Granger, reuniting with the rest of the Slytherins as they made their way into the well-lit Great Hall of Hogwarts, just as grand and gusty as they'd left it. Draco caught the eye of his potions professor, head of house, and close family friend, Severus Snape, sitting at the teacher's table, and nodded politely in greeting. Severus nodded back. With that, he took a seat between a sleepy Vincent and Gregory at the Slytherin table. It was nice to know the draw between Gryffindor and Slytherin last year was still earning him a favor, as some of the older Slytherins clapped him on the back and greeted him cheerfully as they passed by. The red and green banners were still strung from the walls and would continue to be until the House Cup winner got announced at the end of the school year. The babble of chatter died down when McGonagall walked in, snot-faced first-year students in tow, to begin the sorting ceremony. The sorting hat perked up on its stool, cleared its non-existent throat, and began to warble its awful song about the houses. Draco, not caring for any of it, was busy craning his head this way and that to see if he could spot any trace of scruffy black hair hiding at the Gryffindor table when the doors to the Great Hall were flung open and a long red carpet unfurled itself, students having to lift their feet as it rolled to the very front of the hall. The sorting hat paused mid-song. Professor McGonagall placed her hands on her hips. Draco felt his stomach flip and a smile light up on his face, for there was Gilderoy Lockhart, adorned in shimmering golden robes, his hair coiffed perfectly and his smile sparkling white. "I'm not terribly late, I should hope?" asked Lockhart, a dimple appearing as he grinned even wider. "Only, say, fashionably." Various wicks in the sea of students began to giggle and swoon, the closely huddled group of first-years looking on with wide eyes. Lockhart laughed. Yes, I know. Believe me, I completely understand how you all feel to be basking in the presence of someone such as my—" A loud, sputtering sound pierced the air, interrupting Lockhart. A din of grating and screeching quickly followed the bang, then what sounded like distant screaming, and then more of the horrific screeching noise. It was like nails on a blackboard, or scraping metal. Then, silence. "Self," Lockhart finished as murmurs began to trickle through the hall, turning into loud babbling as a few teachers and prefects got up to peer outside the dark windows. The teachers all seemed to quickly discuss something before Severus hurried out of the hall, black robes billowing out behind him. "Goodness, whatever has happened?" Gilderoy Lockhart began loudly, only to be interrupted once more by Professor McGonagall hurrying him up to the teacher's table. "If you will, Professor Lockhart, you are indeed very late. Let us all carry on with the sorting ceremony," she announced, clapping her hands and exchanging a nod with Professor Dumbledore. Despite McGonagall's words, the school carried on furiously whispering as the first-years got sorted, nobody really noticing or caring as each house got a handful of new students. Even the sorting hat was out of sorts, grumpily grumbling the house into which each new student was going. Evidently, magical clothing didn't care for being interrupted. All of a sudden, the twin Weasleys broke the hushed tone as they began howling with laughter at the Gryffindor table. "Fred and George Weasley," shouted Professor McGonagall. "Outside at once!" Draco tilted his head in to listen as the babble of murmurs finally reached the Slytherin table. "Potter and Weasley flew a Muggle car right into the Whomping Willow." Draco couldn't help it. He snorted. Not just your typical snort. No. A loud snort of laughter that had most of the pure-blooded students around him staring in amused disbelief. Refusing to acknowledge how uncouth he'd just been, Draco chose to look across the hall to a bush of trembling brown hair. Granger was staring intensely at her plate, shaking her head. "Talk about making an entrance," said Blaise Zabini once all of the first-years were sorted and the feast had appeared. Dumbledore, thankfully, had not stopped to make a speech as he, Professor McGonagall, and Filch left the Great Hall, presumably to deal with Harry and Weasley. "That has to have violated the statute of secrecy, though, surely," said Theodore not thoughtfully. "Flying all the way here from King's Cross in London?" Draco smirked. If the rumors were indeed true, Harry was going to be in so much trouble, and Draco was going to have so much fun teasing him about it. That was, if he didn't get expelled first. Draco stretched as he flopped down into his readily made bed, enjoying the warmth of the charms sewn into the duvet in contrast with the coolness of the dank dungeons. Today had been a lot. But there was one positive. The Chamber of Secrets hadn't been opened, and it wouldn't be, because as long as the key was in Draco's hands, he knew he would keep the chamber closed. Crisis averted. But simply talking to Tom wouldn't hurt. Tom had made for excellent company during Draco's last week of the summer holidays. Draco often wondered just what Tom was exactly. He'd never heard of magically sentient objects that seemed to be aware of their existence and used a name for themselves. No talking mirror Draco had ever spoken to had a name. Not that he'd ever actually asked, come to think of it. Draco found Tom a much better thing to talk to than Dobby, because Tom actually listened to his problems and advised him, unlike that useless house elf, who usually just blinked up at him cluelessly. Draco rummaged through his bedside drawer for quill and ink. All of his belongings had magically popped themselves where they were meant to go as soon as he touched the bed he'd chosen, furthest from the door, of course. Excitedly, he reached into his satchel and retrieved the sleek black book, ignoring the rest of his dormitory as they shuffled around sorting themselves out for the next day. First day back at Hogwarts. The sorting feast went as expected. You'll never guess what Harry Potter did after missing the train. Back at last. How excellent. What did Harry Potter do? He, along with Ronald Weasley, drove an enchanted muggle car all the way from London right into the Whomping Willow. Well, that sounds incredibly foolish. What is the Whomping Willow? It's a tree on the grounds that attacks anything that comes within 5 feet of it. What an odd thing to have at a castle full of children. What are you smiling about? Draco looked up to find Blaise raising a brow at him as he fiddled with his pajama buttons. Nothing. Mind your own business, Draco scoffed, closing his emerald bed curtains with a great huff. Suddenly in a much fouler mood, he picked up his quill again. I'd better be going now, Tom. Classes begin tomorrow. That is very wise. Best of luck to you, Draco. This year is going to be just swell.